So we want to welcome everyone to our webinar. We will start with introductions, then we're going to go into the updates and some goals for the end of the year, and then discussing some new features so that you can understand about instructor access updates. And then we'll have time for questions. So I'm Christy Warman. I am Professional Development Coordinator with the registry. Some of you may be familiar with me, some of you may not. So I work predominantly with the training calendar, but I am also now beginning to learn working with the stipend module, and we're developing the professional growth advising module, so working with that as well. And so I will turn it over to my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Melanie Rodriguez. I'm the new Professional Development Coordinator. And as Christy said, we're working with the training calendar along with stipend module as well, and any other registry questions that you guys may have. So welcome, happy Wednesday. And let's go ahead and get started. So as we mentioned, we're going to go over some updates that have been done. And I'm sure if you've been messing around with your own training organization and you're seeing, I know a lot of you have asked me questions, why is it royal blue as you see in this picture here? Well, we have made some updates. So the royal blue just lets us know that in the PDI, the Professional Development Inventory, there's information that is missing. So that's the reason it is royal blue. And if you see in the bottom, one of them is light blue, which is the one that says coaching class. That one is informing us that that one is fully filled out correctly. There's no missing information at all. The royal blue ones are the ones that are missing information and that they need to be updated because we made updates. So you may have not input that information just yet, but that's indicating that there's some information that's missing. So it's taking the time to go in, see your events and your PDI information to see what is missing, what needs to be inputted so that the royal blue does go away. And this is going to help you also give you accurate data. So we want to go ahead and start filling in all the royal blues and make sure that we make them a white or a light blue. So it's just going in there and updating the PDIs. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more, a way to make it a lot easier for you guys if you have a lot, more than 1 page, 7 page, so many royal blues to look through. A way would be looking at the Excel, which you could get the exported Excel sheet on the right here where it says export results. You click on there and you can go ahead and get all of the PDIs that you have. And from there, because I'm pretty sure you guys as organization have some that are not active anymore, but you haven't had the chance to make them inactive. So the best way to do this, if you have so many to go over, get this Excel sheet. It's going to give you all of your PDIs. That way you can see which ones are inactive, which ones are active. So you can make those inactive. So that way you don't have to go in and fill in the PDI information that is missing. That way you can make your list a little bit shorter of your to-do list of which ones to look at for your royal blue, checklist to make sure that they're no longer royal blue. We want to make them white or the light blue, indicating that you're not missing any information. So that's the best tip I would suggest. If you have so many PDIs that are royal blue, go take a look first, export that Excel sheet, make them inactive if they are inactive. It's super simple. You just click on the active and that will make it inactive. And of course, if you accidentally made it inactive and it's an actual still active, you can just filter it to go back to see your inactive ones and you can click it again and make it active. It's super simple, nothing too complicated with that. And of course, you can also click on the bottom to see the view training details. This will give you the updated training. You just want to click it, circle next to the training, and then click view training details. That will give you that information there. So again, the professional development inventory was updated. So there's some new sections to review for the completion. That is why, again, it is royal blue. So if you're wondering why are my PDIs royal blue, most of them, it's because we did updates and there's missing information that needs to be inputted. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys that. So section 1 has the general information. Okay, that's missing basic details about professional development offerings inform to early childhood professionals in selecting opportunities and what credit may be earned. Section 2, what is the training about? Why are you doing this training, right? Facilitate early childhood professional development by providing highlights as to the quality of the trainings offered. Section 3, who is this training for? Are we doing it for teachers only, managers, adults in the ECE field, parents? Who is the training for? Filling that section out. And then another part of section 3 is what can participants expect from completing these trainings? So these are information that was updated for you guys to put into your PDIs. So we're going to go into section 1, which is a general information. This is a new training profile field to review for completion. So again, these are things that need to be filled out that were added. That's why it is royal blue, indicating that that information is missing. So if you're gonna go into your PDIs and you're gonna see that there's the little stars right there, that's indicating that that information needs to be filled out, okay? So if that information's not filled out, it's still gonna remain royal blue. If you have that information filled out, it will change and inform us, that your PDI has all the information and it's been updated. So section 1 goes over again what type of training, right? Training, is it peer-to-peer? Is it coaching, consultation, mentoring? Is it career advisement, technical assistance? So that section needs to be filled out first. And it will determine what prompts will populate on other sections. So if you click on training, it's going to populate everything else. If you click on mentoring, it's going to populate something else. So every one that you select, it will have some different population in section 1, section 2, section 3, and section 4. So make sure you fill that section out correctly. For section 1, language is something that was added. And my suggestion for this section is, say you are right now, the training is only going to be in English. That's all you're thinking about. But if maybe later down the line, you know your community, you know that they speak Spanish, they speak Mandarin, they speak French, they speak Armenian, I highly suggest putting in that language because say 6 months from now, you want to offer that training in Spanish, it's not going to allow you because you only selected English in this step here. So let's make sure that if you plan, you know your community, you know the people that you're serving with the trainings and are taking these trainings, you want to go ahead and put in the language so that you don't have to go back and do it again, save yourself that step. Put it in correctly the first time, knowing your community, knowing what languages are in your community. That way you can avoid going back and having to do that when you're trying to create an event and it's not letting you in Spanish, okay? So make sure we're clicking the language, and an option must be selected here to enable a section options when creating an event, okay? So we have to select the language here. Section 2, what is this training about? Again, is this training focused on principles and practices for working directly with young children? You're going to fill that first section out. Is this training focused? Yes or no? Then you're going to select the term that describes the breadth and depth of this training. So the overview, the inventory, in-depth, advanced. You're going to select the terms that best describe the debrief and depth of this training. And when we're doing this, you also want to make sure you're going to provide, the information for the overview and the introductory. That way we know the person that's trying to take the training knows exactly what they're signing themselves up for. For section 2, what is the training about? Select the focus of the training curriculum, choose the options to proceed. So is the training focused on infant care? Is it focused on toddler care? Is it focused on preschool, transitional kindergarten, adults in ECE, parents and families, after school, outside of school time, school age children? So based on that prompt, say, so this example here, we clicked on infant and toddler care. So that we clicked on that, that prompt the bottom one. Select the key domains of the California Infant Toddler Learning and Development Foundations. So when you click on those, that's going to prompt that bottom field. If you click on preschool, it's going to prompt California in Preschool Learning and Development Foundation. So you have to fill that section out too. So based on what you select, it's going to populate something else on the bottom. So if you are filling out the infant care, toddler care, preschool, it's going to ask you for those foundations and you have to fill those out. You have to fill something out. That way it's going to let you save it and move on to the next slide. If you don't fill that out, which is a lot of what I'm seeing in the PDIs, this section is best the learning foundations. That's why they're royal blue most of the time, because the learning foundations are not inputted. So we have to make sure that we're inputting the learning foundations if the training is focused on infant care, toddler care, or preschool. And of course, you can put not applicable to training content. You know your trainings, you know what applies and what doesn't apply. So you can put that is an option down there. Or I'm not familiar with the California Infant Toddler Learning and Development Foundations. If you don't know if the training specifically hits that type of foundation. And then section 2, what is this training about, continues. Again, like I mentioned, if you click on preschool or transitional kindergarten, a different one will populate as we see here. These are the preschool learning foundations. It's a whole lot more than the other ones was. Different sections: social emotional development, mathematics, health, history, social science, visual and performing arts, language and literacy, English language development, physical development, and science. So these have to be filled out for you in order to move on to the next step. So let's make sure that we're filling that out. Again, it's going to populate differently. If for example, you put in, if maybe your training focuses on infant care and preschool, it's going to populate both. It's going to populate the California Infant Care Toddler Learning Foundations, and then also do the preschool one. So you'll have to fill out both sections in order to move on to section 3.
So section 3 is discussing what this training is for and what participants can expect while they're participating. So you have, again, like the language option, several options to choose from. And again, we would recommend that you select all the possible audiences that you are hoping to reach, even if you may not be offering, maybe you're offering them in different sessions. You know, one might be for parents and then one might be for professionals. But if you haven't selected those options here, then when you create the event, you won't have them available. And so to make them available, you'd have to go back to the PDI and make the selection. So again, it's advisable to go ahead and select all the possible options that you might be offering this item to. So you could select all of them and then all of the options would be available to you. But you don't have to select all of them, just the ones that you know for sure would be the audience that you're seeking to reach. And then the other box, which in any case where there's the box marked other, if you select that, that's going to pop open a new field so that you can tell us, you can enter then what are those others. And the next prompt under that section would be about describing what participants would need to know or maybe do prior to attending this training. So if there's a specific training they should have attended previously, that this is the opportunity for you to include that information for them so that they are aware. You can select either completion of specific training, completion of specific activities, work experience, content knowledge, again, other, or none. If you select any of the boxes besides none, then you're going to have another box open so that you can describe what those items are. So again, if it's a specific activity, say a pre-evaluation, then you would write that and describe that, and then perhaps provide a link for them to be able to do that pre-evaluation. So that's the same case for work experience or content knowledge, so that they can be informed of what knowledge or experience they should have prior to enrolling in your offering. Next is the competency section. This is something that was already a part of entering your items, but now when you select a primary competency area, you'll see that underneath the drop-down menu, all of the competencies are listed again. When you select from the drop-down menu, it's automatically going to mark that competency in the list below, and then you are able to select more competencies. So the drop-down is for the primary competency, and then the others are for additional competency areas that you may be covering in this training. But it's important to note that if you select more than one, that the next section will be impacted by that, because under the competency section is the section to provide the learning outcomes. So for every competency that is selected, a learning outcome field will open. So you'll also notice that currently that does not have an asterisk next to it where it says provide the learning outcome. My recommendation is to go ahead and enter that, because I don't have an exact date, but I do believe that will become required. So then that's a part of information that you may not have right now, but I would recommend gathering that so that you can complete this section, so that you don't have to worry about going back and completing it later. So right now, again, it's not required. You can still move forward without entering it, but I would highly recommend that you just go ahead and do that, because it is ultimately going to become a required field. And then at the bottom there is a question that some people may be familiar with the ECE mapping tool. It's fine to say no, because if you're not familiar with it, then we don't want guesses. But if you are familiar with it and it's actually was utilized to map the competencies for this training event, then you can select yes and then enter that information. But otherwise, it's completely acceptable to just say no. And then you're going to provide information to the participants about what they can expect. The next few prompts will talk about assessment and activities. And so this next prompt is, how are you going to know that your learning outcomes were achieved? And so what assessments were used before or during the training? So there's an existing list here. And again, if something isn't covered that you would be utilizing, then you can select the other box and enter in that field. Or you can select none if this is not a part of your process for offering this training. And then what assessments are used at the end or after? So the same case, we have several options for you to choose from, but if those are not the options that you will be offering, so you can select another other and tell us, or if the answer is none, then that's the appropriate selection. Next will be, what can the participants expect as their experience during the training event? So what will be provided? So here are several options, like an oral presentation, videos, handouts, and again, other is an option, and you can select, I believe, multiple options. So if there's going to be handouts and an oral presentation, then you can select both of those. And then what learning activities will participants participate in? What will they experience while they're in this event? So we have several, again, options for you to choose from. And if none of those describe the learning activities that they will experience, then you can select other to provide that information in detail. And then what type of supports? What's going to happen after? Will there be anything available? Will there be follow-up? Will there be, you know, sharing of resources? What will happen after to support the participants who were attending this event? And if it's other, again, you can tell us that, but if it's none, then select none, and that's fine. And then the next page is the last page is page 4. So we're not going to cover that because it's all optional, and those were already previously part of what you would enter when you were putting in the content. So we do have resources available to let you further know how to manage these updates. So there's a user manual available through the resource website. There are resources with us. If you need support to meet with us, you can definitely reach out and schedule technical assistance meetings. We have, as Melanie mentioned, in the actual PDI, when you're entering it, links and hovers that explain what we're asking for in those fields, and also the resources that it will link to, such as breadth and depth. That's one example. Outcomes, there's also a resource that you can click the link and it will provide more information on creating meaningful outcomes. So we do have resources and supports for these updated profile fields. So we don't want you to just feel like you don't have anything to help support you in completing these fields. And then unrelated to the PDI directly, there were also some updates with the instructor access. So when you approve your instructors, you previously were only asked if you could provide them with access to event management or no. So it was one or the other. But now you have the ability to provide multiple levels of instructor access. So you can, again, once they're approved, they're just going to be at the baseline no access. So you can go to their status and change it to either just viewing the event, knowing they've been attached, which is the most basic access. So they're just attached to an event, they show up, they train, and then they're pretty much done with that event. If you provide event management, then they can create events. They can then manage the attendance after the event, and they can support with that roster management prior to the event. So they have access basically to the event management page. Now we've added the training and event management manager access. So now that would allow trainers, if you grant it to them, the access to your PDI so that they can enter the information. And then they would also then be able to access event management. And then you can also grant them training sponsor access, which is the highest level of access that a training organization could have, so that you would have access to training sponsor tools such as reports, and then obviously PDI and event management. That also would grant them access to instructor management. So those are usually not the typical access level granted unless it's an employee who's also an instructor. So we just wanted to make sure that you are aware what those different levels of access mean when you are going in to approve your instructors and grant them different levels of access. Okay, so we are at the section where we can take your questions, and I do see that we have some. Let's see, I actually see Angelica, you have your hand raised. Are you able to unmute and ask your question? Okay, we can come back to your question. Let's see, we have We have a question that says, if the foundations are not addressed directly in the training, do you mark as not applicable? That would be appropriate. If it is not covering those specific domains related to either the infant toddler foundations or the preschool foundations, then it is appropriate to mark that as not applicable.
Angelica said she's not able to unmute.
Okay, because I did grant her the ability to.
There we go. Well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
My question is posted in the chat because I couldn't find my unmute button. But in section 3, I am requested to select the foundational knowledge, either 1, 2, or 3 for a training that's listed in our inventory list. Once I'm updating the information, is there more information on what those 3 areas indicate?
Those are specific to the Pathways program, so that's not applicable to everyone. That's
Right.
only applicable to your Pathways options. And so that's something that we would probably talk about more directly, but generally it's determined by each organization which one it is. And I believe right now that it's probably appropriate to select all 3, but that's probably a more one-on-one question specific to your organization, because not everyone has Pathways and those options available.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's see. I see someone else has their hands raised. But it's not letting me. There we go. So Angie, I'm going to ask you to unmute so that you can ask your question.
Hi, sorry, I don't have a question. I don't know how to I don't know if the icon means lower your hand to lower or raise your hand to raise. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Let's see. I see Clara. You have a question?
Good morning, Christy. So I do have a question. I kind of asked it in the chat box, but I'm not sure I'm getting the response or understanding the response. So like for instance, we will have a training, I don't know, for instance, we're doing an ASQ training in English, and then at a later date, we're going to do the Spanish session. In the past, I've always entered, or since you've started to have the inventory, we've always kind of created the event as an English event to have all the information in English. And then I've created a Spanish event to have the title in Spanish, the description in Spanish, because I thought that information was necessary for the person who is potentially going to be enrolled. And then so when they completed the class, that information would be on their education report in Spanish. So I don't know if I should not be creating 2 events. I don't know if that question made any sense.
No, from what I understand what you're saying, you create, well, events is separate. If you're talking about the PDI entries, you're creating 2 for
Yes.
the same content, but one in English and one in Spanish.
Yes.
That's fine. That's appropriate.
Okay.
Because to be honest, if we're talking about actual like, you know, language equality, then there
Yes.
should be entries that are in Spanish for Spanish speakers. I just
Okay.
know that a lot of agencies don't have the capacity to, or maybe they don't have, like for instance, they don't create the content. So being able to translate it, if it's
Got
provided in
it.
English, they may not have it. So they are unable to do that. If
Okay.
you are able to do that, you could either, like you're saying, enter it as 2, or I have seen where some organizations enter it in the one PDI. They can select English and Spanish, and then they create the information in English and then do like space, and then put it in Spanish. The challenge
Okay.
with that is some of the information fields have limited characters, so you could run
Right.
out of space. So
Okay.
it's completely fine if that's working for you to do them as separate. And then, just for the one that will always be in English, you select English. And for the
Right.
one that obviously is going to be in Spanish, you select Spanish.
Okay, well, I think you did answer my question, and I think we'll continue to do it as we have. So, and by the way, yes, it could be other languages. I think for me, it is Spanish. So, thank you, Christy.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we answered that one. Oh, can the PowerPoint be emailed to us? We are going to send a recording of this, and perhaps we can save this as a PDF and send along with that when we send everyone the recording. Okay, let's see. If we have an extensive amount of trainings available and there are events tied to them, will it remove credit from any participants if we mark the trainings as inactive? No. What's already been entered for people's education and training reports are not impacted even if you updated content. Perhaps, an example is you go in to update a current entry and you change the hour value from 1 to 2. That wouldn't grant now 2 hours to those people who already received the 1. It would just be from that date, that time forward, impacting it. So it will not, and if you change something to inactive, it doesn't remove any of the credit that people have already received and had recorded on their education and training reports. Question about, this is a large undertaking for the amount of PDI, and especially in summer and fall. If we slowly make progress over time, is this all right? We understand that this is a large undertaking. We have seen, since we did have a webinar in May announcing these changes, that it's probably not been at the top of everyone's priority list, but we are trying to keep it on top of mind so that we can make sure that the information contained within the registry is updated and accurate. So we would prefer it to be sooner rather than later, but as we mentioned, we understand. And that's why, as Melanie suggested, looking at all of your items that maybe could be made inactive so that you're not looking to update those so much as you are focusing on the active items is our recommendation, to kind of whittle it down from such a daunting task. Because yes, some people have PDIs with pages upon pages of entries. And so it's recommended that you look at all of those just so you can see what should be active and what needs to be inactive, so that you can make it a more reasonable task to accomplish. What is the best way to manage events that at some point will primarily be marketed to a specific language? So the events is a separate component from the PDI. So you will constantly be creating events where you may not constantly be creating PDI. You may be repeating PDI items. And so that's where you're going to want to make sure that it's the most accurate. And that's why, if you know that there may be plans in the future to offer more than one language, then you should go ahead and select it when you're creating that PDI entry, so that when it does become the reality of offering it in that other language, it's available. But if you don't, it doesn't mean that you can't then go back into the PDI once you do start offering that other language and then click that and make that update. It's just we're advising you to do that so that you can save yourself a step when you're in there creating an event. Can we share a PDI with another organization so they don't have to recreate it in their system?
Yeah. I'll
There's
copy it.
not a way to like download. There's a way to download like what Melanie mentioned, exporting the Excel, but that doesn't give the details like the learning outcomes, the content. It's very basic as far as the name, the training ID, and the percentages and things of the competencies. So it's not going to give you the minute details of all of the things we pretty much just went over. So that's not an option currently. What you may consider, and I don't know if this would work for you, is tagging those people, or you know, them tagging you if you share it, and then that way you all have resources to know that it's being offered. But as far as like actually creating in each other's PDI, that's not an option that's available currently. Okay. Has the training manual been updated recently? If it has been updated, can you email us the most current one? The most current one is actually available in the resource website, and there should be, it was updated last May, but there will be, with probably in the next month or so, a new one that will incorporate what I went over about the instructor access section. So we can let you know and email that to this mail group when we have it finalized. But until then, there is one available at all times in the resource documents, right in the registry, and then in the registry resource website. There was a question about having 21 pages to fix. Can we archive all and start over? That's a question for your really your program to answer. If they're all inactive and you're not going to use them, you can make them inactive and just start entering fresh. But I don't know if that's the case. So I can't exactly advise that because the inactive designation is just to make sure that those aren't utilized. So that, and it also would help with this task to really focus on those that need to be updated. So that's not something that you all would have to determine what's actually still used out of your PDI list. What will that archive impact trainings for? So I think the question when it says, will the archive impact trainings that are scheduled for August? If you make it inactive, but it already has an event created, it should not impact it. It should not like delete the event or anything like that. It's just now removing it from the active file. So when you go and create your event, it will no longer be an option for you to select. When you create an event, you go in and you search your PDI. Your PDI is only pulling up your active trainings. So if you've now made it inactive, it wouldn't appear in that list to create as a new event. If multiple languages are selected in the PDI, then when the event is added, will it translate all the information to the language selected once the event is published? No, the registry doesn't translate what you enter. When people select the language option to view the registry in either English, Spanish, or simplified Chinese, it's only translating the stuff that is a part of the registry, not stuff that people have entered. So it will not translate for you. It, unfortunately, that would be great. And that would actually make it probably more helpful to be able to enter those items as separate or for people who are utilizing those languages, but currently it does not. I think Melanie wanted to also provide some information about that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Yeah, it won't translate it. You're gonna have to manually go in and translate it yourself.
Is there a way to check more than one training as inactive at a time? Unfortunately, no. You will still have to do it title by title, unfortunately. I think the last question I see, is there an import export option where we can do this in Excel and then upload it? There is not. You can download the PDI so that you can see all your titles and determine from there what needs to be made inactive, but you will not be able to then upload it so that it then takes that information and makes that change for you, unfortunately.
That's why I really suggest you guys review which ones are inactive that you're no longer using. That way you eliminate your list because it can be overwhelming. Like we said, we know a lot of you have a lot to review. So maybe there's some that are inactive that you just have not used. Put those inactive. That way it doesn't seem so overwhelming.
Another question, can we grab from those trainings to finish the new sections or just restart fresh? Not sure. If you mean, can you edit those blue ones? I'm not sure if that's what you mean.
I think they mean that all of their trainings are in Royal, all the PDIs are in Royal Blue, so they're asking if they can just get that information and start new. But it might be more work. I think it might be easier for you just to input what is missing. Because
Right.
for some, it might just be two things that are missing. So you're gonna give yourself more work to start fresh. You just have to really see what exactly is missing. I would highly suggest maybe taking one page at a time. If some of you have like 30 pages to go through, take one page at a time and eliminate that one page one day or 1 week, whatever, however fast you can do it. That way it doesn't seem so overwhelming if you're doing so many at a time. Give yourself breaks. That way you don't make any mistakes and still have stuff missing in the PDIs.
And if you have any challenges with any of these items, you can reach out to us directly. I always recommend sending an email with screenshots just so we can see exactly what you're seeing. And so here is our contact information so that you can reach out to us and ask those questions and get that support. So either one of us should be able to help you. And we are available Monday through Friday.
Tanya, yes, if they're inactive, if you're no longer using those PDIs, you can make them inactive. That way only your active ones will show, and that way you'll see which ones need to be corrected if they're royal blue. But that's completely up to you. If you're no longer using those PDIs and they're inactive, yes, you can make them inactive.
Another question, if the title is the same but the description will be different, do we have to do 2 PDIs? I would say yes, because those are 2 different items. If they have different descriptions, I think probably would need more context for that to be able to answer it completely accurately. But just based on this information, if they're described to be different, then it sounds like they're different content. So that would need to be 2 different entries. Will you provide another webinar to support with pulling reports? We can put that as a potential for our next webinar content, but also if you don't want to wait until our next webinar, you can set up a time, an appointment with us, and we can go over that with you and your staff who may need that information directly. But thank you. We actually do appreciate information on what you would find useful for webinars. That's very helpful to us so that we're making a good use of your time as well as ours. Do we keep trainings active when we're done with them? If you're going to use the content again, because some organizations do, they offer the same items on certain cycles. So that's why they may have them used repeatedly or have different dates to offer them. So yes, if you need to do that, but if it's a one, kind of like a one and done, then you can make it inactive after you've utilized it. And then if you decide you want to offer it again, that it's in there and you have need for it, you can just make it active again. You can reactivate it at any time, like what Melanie described earlier about just going into filter by active versus inactive or all to see your inactive. So if you wanted to see just inactive, select that from that filter and it should show you just those that you've marked as inactive. Any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like to share, Melanie?
Not really. I just think give yourself time. Like I said, don't try to finish if you have a lot all in one day, because you might make mistakes and miss a few. So take it one day at a time. Step one, if you have a lot, make them inactive. If you're no longer using them, that's going to save you a lot of time, because you might be putting in information and you're like, wait, we haven't used this, we're not going to use it, and you could have wasted your time. So make them inactive if they're inactive, and then go from there. And of course, if you guys are stuck, if you need any help, you can always reach out to me or Christy, and we'll help you.
Well, that's all we have for you all. And if no one has any questions, then we are happy and willing to end early. But feel free to reach out to us if you come up with a question after this. Oh, I see Regina has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, when we press, say, it was in the earlier part, when it says English speaker, is it geared towards Spanish or Mandarin? If we put all of them in at once, what's going to happen is on our end, our providers are going to come back and say, I'm Spanish, you put down Spanish, you put down English, you put down Mandarin, and a Mandarin person will say, I'm coming and I want somebody to speak Mandarin.
You're talking about, they can't see that until you put it in as the option you select in your event. But if you don't put it in the PDI as any potential option, you can't select anything but the one that you picked in the PDI. So you can control that when you create the event.
Oh, so oh, okay. Because my understanding was press all of them so I don't have to go back later and change it if we have another training.
Right. That's why we're saying do all the possibilities that you ever think you might offer ever. So you don't have to go back. So you don't have to go back. You can, but so you don't have to put them all in there. And then when you're creating the event, only select the ones that this is appropriate for.
Got it.
Because if you don't select in the PDI, you won't be able to select anything for the event. Any other questions? Well, that's all we have for you today. Thank you all for attending and for asking your questions. And if you have any others, please feel free to reach out and enjoy the rest of your day.
Happy Wednesday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for being part of the ECE community. The work you do is important, and we are here to help.